Is doing a mini facelift worth the money? This is the question that a lot of people ask me, and some people feel like it's definitely something they should consider, and others say, well, maybe I should wait till I'm a bit older and I will get a bigger procedure then. So instead of spending money twice, I would just spend it once on one procedure. Now, is it worth the money? Is it not worth the money? We're going to talk about this in this video. Hi, I'm Dr. Konstantin. I'm a facial plastic surgeon based in New York, and today we're talking about mini facelift. And specifically, the question is it actually worthwhile to do a mini facelift, knowing that probably at some point later in life you might consider another cosmetic procedure, another facelift. Now, we're only talking about people who already decided that they want a facelift. Not everybody needs it, of course, and those people who feel like, well, this is definitely the way to go for me and I am going to get a facelift at some point in my life. We want to help those people answer the question whether they should start doing something fairly early in life, getting a mini facelift, or they should just wait till those aging changes become a little bit more significant and do a bigger facelift, such as deep plane facelift later on. And of course, before we start talking about whether it would be worthwhile to do a mini facelift, let's just talk about what actually mini facelift is and how it's different from a bigger procedure. Now, a mini facelift is, as the name implies, a minimally invasive procedure. It still requires surgery, it still requires making incisions, but typically it's a smaller procedure with the shorter incision, shorter recovery time, and it's designed specifically for people with early aging changes. Typically, it's the jowls that people notice the most, and a mini facelift is designed to reduce the jowls, reduce that early facial sagging. It's not quite as effective as some bigger procedure at lifting the chin or tightening the neck. Those would require something more extensive, but the mini facelift works typically very well for people in their 30s and maybe early 40s. What are the downsides of the mini facelift? Why not just do it? Well, there are a couple of things that you should know about it. Number one, typically the longevity of the mini facelift is shorter than the longevity of a bigger procedure. So you don't expect quite as many years to get out of the mini facelift as you would expect from a deep plane or extended sub-smas facelift. Another one is that the changes are fairly subtle in some situations. Because this type of facelift is done for people with very early aging changes, reversing those early aging changes does not does not have a rejuvenating effect on the face quite to the same extent as a bigger facelift would. Now, it might be typical for a bigger facelift to make somebody look good 10 or sometimes even 15 years younger. This is not quite the case with somebody who does a mini facelift in their 30s. They wouldn't really be looking 15 years younger. So the changes would be definitely present, but somewhat not as significant as the ones that we would expect from a different procedure. Now, of course, let's not forget that a mini facelift, even though it's minimally invasive, it's still a surgical procedure, so it requires some form of anesthesia, it requires incisions, and it does have complications, although the rate of complications is fairly low with this type of procedure, but they definitely real, and you should consider that before you make your decision. Now, also, you would end up with incision lines. Anytime we make a cut, unfortunately, we cannot make it heal without leaving some kind of scar, and we do our best to hide those scars as good as possible, but still, after you get a mini facelift, you would have some scars that's going to be typically hiding around the ear. Now, what are the benefits of a mini facelift? Why do this at all? It doesn't create that much of a change, and it's not very long lasting, so why we should even consider this? Well, of course, everyone is different and people feel differently about the early stages of aging process, but oftentimes people feel like their genetics may not be as favorable as with some other people, and they might be aging at a slightly faster rate than their peers. And when they look around, when they are in their mid-30s, they feel like they look the oldest out of their group of friends, and it could be very distressing. So reversing those early aging changes, which mini facelift is very effective at, could have a very significant positive impact on their emotional state and on that person's confidence. Another benefit of doing a mini facelift is actually the fact that most people will probably not notice that you had something done. And this is very important because a lot of people just don't want anybody to know that they had something done. So people would say, if I wait till those aging changes, till my jowls and the cheek sagging become very noticeable and I get a facelift, then everybody would look at me and realize that I had something done because I looked much older before I started looking younger again. Now, if somebody does a facelift in the early stages of aging, then you don't really quite have that transition going back and forth, and the face looks just fresh and youthful, but without a noticeable change going back and forth between aged appearance and more youthful appearance. And the third one, I'm not quite sure that I would 100% agree with this, but a lot of people feel like they need to get the surgical procedure while they still are in a good health and the tissue has a good quality, good blood supply, so they are going to be healing better than if they wait longer and do the same procedure when they may not be in such a good health. Now, I'm not sure that one should consider a surgical procedure just because they are in good health, and I can tell you that people of the older demographics heal quite well, but this is one of the things that people take into consideration when they deciding whether they should do a facelift now or wait a little bit longer. Now that we discussed the benefits and the downside of the mini facelift, let's actually talk about the cost so we can make a decision here. So what would it cost somebody to get a mini facelift? Now, there are definitely a huge range in pricing depending on where you do the procedure, depending on who you do the procedure with. If you are getting a facelift in a major metropolitan area with a plastic surgeon who specializes in facelift, you can expect the price to be higher. And if you travel abroad and you do a facelift in Thailand, then of course the price is going to be cheaper, which of course comes at some downside. Now, the average price for a mini facelift, I would say, is somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000. Now, of course, you can find something that's much cheaper, and of course, you can find something that's a lot more expensive, but not necessarily you should go to those extremes. So if you find a procedure that's between $15,000 and $30,000, that would probably be quite reasonable, and that would be the average for this type of procedure. Now, when you compare the cost of a mini facelift with the cost of a full facelift, like a deep plane facelift, for example, I would probably just double the price of a mini facelift to figure out what would a bigger facelift would cost you, right? So a deep plane facelift might cost somewhere from $30,000 to $100,000, and that's just to give you some range and let you know what you can expect and what should you be expecting, what price tag you should be expecting from one procedure versus the other. So let's do some math here. Let's say you do a mini facelift today at $25,000, and later in life you do a deep plane facelift for $50,000. So your overall cost would be $75,000, which is definitely not a trivial number. Now, if you skip a mini facelift and wait till you get to the 50s, then your overall cost would be $50,000, which is also not cheap, but definitely not quite as expensive as getting two procedures done. Of course, if somebody tells me, well, when I look in a mirror, I really cannot stand how I look, and I stop taking pictures because every time I see my photo, I almost cry because I see those jowls and they age me so much. And people tell me, well, I don't really go out with my friends quite as much because I'm looking at all of them and they look so youthful and I feel like I'm their grandma. And those are the real things that I hear from patients. those people definitely could be candidates for a mini facelift, and waiting for 5, 10, 15 years for those aging changes to become more significant may not be the best strategy, because you're going to be spending those 10, 15 years just feeling unhappy with yourself, feeling upset, and just not feeling that confidence of actually looking good and feeling good about yourself. So what's the conclusion? Is the mini facelift worth the money? Well, it's definitely worth the money for those people with early aging changes who are much troubled by their appearance. They really don't feel like they're looking the best, and it affects them significantly. Those people who feel like, maybe I'm not happy with myself, but it doesn't look so bad and I don't want to jump into doing a big surgical procedure. I might want to try some Botox, some fillers, and I'll be perfectly fine with it. Spending the money on surgery, spending the money on a mini facelift probably would not be the best idea. Those people can wait for a little bit till those aging changes really start bothering them, and at that point they might get a bigger procedure such as a deep plane or extended sub-smas facelift. If you'd like to know more about facelifts, mini facelifts, or facial rejuvenation, you can follow my Instagram channel, or you can ask me a question here in the comments and I'll be happy to answer it.